Okay, so today we are going to start our class discussion on the excerpt that we have from Across 5 Aprils. Now, if you guys want to, if you feel like you missed anything yesterday in our pre-read information, that is recorded and it is on my YouTube channel because, you know, I'm a YouTube star now.
How many subscribers?
I have like 17 subscribers, so I'm totally a YouTube star now.
How many likes on video?
Not that many. I'm actually not interested in becoming a YouTube star. That does not excite me at all.
You should be like Mr. Beast.
Okay.
16 mil.
So, Across 5 Aprils. Across 5 Aprils is a novel, was written by a lady named Irene Hunt, and it takes place during the American Civil War. So, you're going to get out your literature book. You're going to turn to page 41 first. And we're going to do a couple more pre-reading things. Everyone should have their book open. I should not have to send a special invitation to any single person. 41. Again, we talked about yesterday about how this is historical fiction. There are people in it that are real, but there are also people in it who are made up. Jethro Creighton is the main character. And why do you think the title is Across 5 Aprils? Why do you think that's the title? Anybody have any ideas? Talon?
Maybe because he's been working at a job for 5 years and it's been 5 Aprils.
It has been 5 Aprils, but it's not a job. Do you know what the 5 Aprils are referring to, Johnny?
The war?
The war, yeah.
5
the
years.
Civil War. The Civil War lasted a long time. Next year, in 7th and 8th grade history, we'll be doing the first half of U.S. history, and we go through the Civil War, and one of the things you'll learn is just kind of how awful the Civil War was. The American Civil War was just a real bloodbath. A lot of people died. A lot, guys. A lot of people died. And there were a lot of lingering effects that are still affecting us as a nation today. So, when you think about the Civil War, do you guys know anything about it already? Have you ever... You guys know, because you guys have already read this book, but do you know anything about the Civil War outside of the book?
Yeah.
What do you know about it?
I know that we won.
We won. Well, we're still a whole country. Oregon wasn't even a state back then, so you can't say that Oregon took part in it.
That Abraham Lincoln was our president, and there was the Gettysburg Address.
Abraham Lincoln was our president. He made the Gettysburg Address, which was a short speech that he gave that I actually had to memorize in the 8th grade for a grade. The whole thing. Wow. Yep. I actually have students do it as extra credit. But anyway, so so Abraham Lincoln was our president during the Civil War. Just some things you need to know. Illinois is where Jethro Creighton lives. Illinois was Union. But there were some people in Illinois that were Southern supporters. The Army, the conditions for the soldiers in the Army were terrible. Okay? Terrible. As many soldiers died of disease as died of the fighting. Okay? Their camps were very unsanitary. They didn't make very much money. They didn't have very much food. I mean, it was just miserable conditions. The more you read about it, the more you're like, holy cow, that's terrible. I mean, it was just awful. Their uniforms were made out of wool. which is super fun when you're fighting a war in the South in the summer. Can you imagine wearing wool in July in like Alabama, where it's hot and humid and miserable? They didn't get much for their pay, depending on your rank and also whether the Army had the money to pay you, and depending on what side you were on. You could make $11 a month up to $20 a month. Officers,
That's only $240 a year.
Well, keep in mind that
Money hasn't been invented yet. Oh.
well, no, it was money was invented. No, it's not that. It's that things were less expensive back then.
Oh,
Okay, but even so, $11 a month is still not a very good pay rate, especially for the conditions that they suffered under. If things were good, a soldier would have either a pound of bacon or a pound of beef, and then a loaf of bread each day. That's what they got. And their loaves weren't like our loaves. They were like this, okay? Now, you think, oh, a pound of bacon every day. Yeah, but it's not like, they didn't have refrigerators back then or freezers or anything like that. So the meat that they got was, if it wasn't spoiled, because sometimes the meat was already spoiled when they got it, it was dried meat, so like jerky, okay? Dried or salted to preserve it. Leaky tents, food, often, like I said, the meat was often spoiled, maggots in the food, and if you were hungry enough, you ate it. It was a hard life. And so as you read this story, you want to have a little bit of compassion for the characters, because this was a miserable period of time for people that were fighting for the nation. Okay, so I am going to we're on page 43 now. I am going to read the first couple of paragraphs to you, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit. I do want you to keep in mind that the Civil War was fought about 150 years ago, almost 150 years ago. And there are still these issues all over the world. There are civil wars in other countries. What civil war means is just that a country is fighting against itself and not another country. There's all kinds of personal conflict, all kinds of heartbreak all over the world. And like I said before, our Civil War had consequences and repercussions that are still affecting us today. So just kind of keep that in mind. By the way, if you want to look at the map on page 42, you can see where Illinois is. It's smack in the middle. I guess Oregon was a state at that point. You can see it says ILL. The post office abbreviation for Illinois is just IL, but you can, Brady, we're on 142. Look at the map on 42, okay? So you can see where Illinois is. You see how southern Illinois dips down, and Tennessee was a slave state. So do you see how close? When people think of Illinois, they often think of Chicago. Chicago is up by the Great Lakes. Illinois dips down into the upper south of the U.S., so you can kind of see where we are. Okay. When the Civil War began, Jethro Creighton, son of Matt and Ellen, was too young to enlist in General Washington's army. Why would they call it General Washington's army? This wasn't the Revolutionary War. Anybody have any ideas? Johnny?
Because he was like the symbol of hope.
Yeah, Washington was kind of the symbol of the army, and so they still called it Washington's army. His brothers, Tom and John, joined the Union Army along with Jethro's cousin Eb and Shadrach Yale, the town school teacher. Tom was killed almost immediately, and the last Creighton brother, Bill, went to fight as well. Jethro was left to take care of the family's Illinois farm, along with his sister Jenny, since their father was too ill to work. Together they labored to provide for their parents and for their brother's wife Nancy and her 2 young children. Jethro's responsibilities had made him mature beyond his years, and he followed the news of the war with keen interest. He read of the tragic mistakes of the Union generals and of the horrible conditions the soldiers endured on the battlefield. Desertion was becoming a widespread problem, and there was even rumor that Cousin Eb was a deserter. It's quite a way to start. Right, we're in the middle of a war. Why didn't Jethro join the army like his brothers? Brady?
He wasn't old enough.
I'm sorry,
He wasn't old enough.
louder.
He wasn't old enough.
There you go. He wasn't old enough. He wasn't old enough. You're supposed to be a certain age before you join the army. I will tell you that a lot of young men lied about their age and joined the army at 16 or 14, especially if they looked older than they were. Because back then they didn't have any real way to check your age. They didn't have IDs and, all that kind of stuff. If you said you were 18 and you looked 18, they signed you up. But he was too young. Can you tell me what the 2 opposing sides of this war were? Johnny?
The Union Army and the Confederate Army.
The Union Army and the Confederate Army. The Union Army was the North. The Confederate Army was the South. Okay? Sometimes they were called the Blues and the Grays, but to be honest, their uniforms were all mixed up. They didn't have, uniforms the way we have them now.
What if you accidentally shot someone that was...
It happens quite frequently that somebody would get shot by friendly fire. They call it friendly fire when you accidentally shoot one of your own people.
What?
It sounds so nice, doesn't it? Friendly fire. It's not very friendly when you kill somebody.
Sometimes if bullets don't go where you're aiming, it can also hit the person.
Well, yeah, that's why it's called friendly fire, because it's an accident and you're killed by people on your side, or shot by people on your own side. Okay, so how did Jethro know what was happening on the battlefield? How did he know, Johnny?
Newspapers.
Newspapers. Newspapers were very, 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 very important. I will tell you something very interesting about the Civil War. The Civil War was the first war to be documented by photography. Photography was brand new, was still being developed. A lot of the Civil War photographs you'll see are a little bit blurry. But there are a lot of Civil War photographs because it was the first war to be documented by photography. And some of the photographs are pretty gruesome because the photographers would come out with the newspaper reporters and they would take pictures of the battlefield when it's done as they're trying to clean up. And, it's bodies everywhere. It's, pretty scary, pretty upsetting. Huh?
Who would like that job?
Photography. So newspaper photographers, and there are people all over the world, war correspondents, that go to places that are at war and they photograph it because they understand that people need to know about it. But often what you'll find out is reporters and photographers suffer PTSD the same way soldiers do because of what they see and what they experience on the battlefield. So it's actually a pretty difficult job to do, but one of those jobs that's necessary. It's awful, but it's necessary. What is a deserter? Do you guys know what that is? A deserter? It's not somebody who likes to eat lots of cake. What is a deserter? Brady?
So a person who basically left, I guess.
Yes. I'm gonna need you to speak up for the microphone. Yes, it's somebody who leaves their post. So if you are a soldier, you sign a contract. Even today, you sign a contract that you're gonna give a certain number of years to the Army. So if you desert your post, nowadays they call it going AWOL, absent without leave. But if you desert your post and you leave, you're a deserter, and that is actually really heavily punished even today in the military. If you go AWOL, that's really punished. But also, people look at you like you're a deserter. and it wasn't just that you left, it was that you left everybody else to do the fighting that you had said you would do. It's like a breaking of a promise, right? Yeah, you're breaking a contract, but it's like a breaking of a promise, and you're really looked down upon, especially in this society. Because if you're a man and you make a promise to do something, you're going to do it, right? That's like one of our like pinnacles of manhood is a man keeps his promises. But I want you to think about something. Why would soldiers desert? Why would they be a deserter? Johnny?
Because they're tired. They're tired of losing men and like fighting bloody battles.
They're tired. Tired's a big one for sure. They're tired. The conditions were horrible, right? We already talked about that. That the conditions were really, really bad. They didn't have good food. It was cold, it was damp, or it was hot and it was damp, and people were sick. It was awful. It's really awful. And even though you may not agree with somebody's decision, sometimes you can understand it, right? Like you can say, I think you came to the wrong decision. That wasn't the right thing to do. I understand why you did it though, and I can feel compassion for you. I still don't think you were right, but I can understand and I can try to help you, make better decisions or whatever in the future. So as we're thinking about soldiers who desert, sometimes it really boils down to they just couldn't handle the pressure of what it takes to be a soldier, because that is more than anybody in this classroom can imagine. I mean, we all know people probably who have served in the military. I do. I certainly do. My husband's uncle was a Apache helicopter. He flew border patrol in the first Desert Storm. So before you guys were all born, before 9/11, before all of that. This was back in the early 90s. He flew border patrol. He flew Apache helicopters. And then after that, he worked with, like, after they repaired them, he would fly to make sure they were fixed and stuff. He's done some pretty amazing things in the military, and he's a very special person. But I have many friends that are military, and every time they get sent overseas, I'm like, worry about them, right? So we all know people that are in the military, but none of us personally knows what it's like to be in the middle of a battle. Right? None of you guys have ever been to war. Have you? No. I have never been to war. So none of us really know what it's like. And so sometimes we understand that if we don't really know what it's like, it's hard for us to understand why it might be so awful that somebody would desert. Does that make sense? Okay, so going on to the next page, 44. Jethro's out. We're going to sum up the plot on this page. It's early spring. The fields need to be plowed. Jethro hears something. What's the sound that Jethro hears that causes him to go out into the woods? Johnny?
Some sort of bird noise.
A bird noise. Yeah. Anybody know what bird he hears?
Turkey?
That's right, Hope, a turkey. He hears a turkey call. And it's weird because it's not quite right. There's something different about it. Like, it sounds like a turkey, but it's not quite right. So he goes into the woods. Why was he carrying a rifle?
To protect himself.
To protect himself, and also, what would be a secondary reason to carry a rifle?
Get some turkey for dinner.
Get some turkey for dinner if he hears a turkey call, yeah. Or whatever, if he sees an animal out in the field. If you can shoot wild game, that means you don't have to slaughter one of your own animals. If you can shoot some wild game. So he has his gun for protection and for food. He's going into the woods. How does he feel as he's going
scared,
up the woods?
frightened.
Yeah, frightened, scared, apprehensive. That's a really good word. Do you guys know what that means, apprehensive?
No.
Like you're a little bit, I don't know what's going on here, a little nervous. You know, and he's very apprehensive. He is, you're right, he's scared. So he goes into the woods. It's really interesting. I want you to look at on page 44, the first column, about halfway down, it says Jethro had learned to handle a gun properly. You guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Jethro had learned to handle a gun properly, and it was always possible that he might bring down some kind of wild game for the table, or that he would have need to defend himself against a desperate man. There's a little bit of characterization going on here. What does that tell you about Jethro as a person? What kind of a person is he?
Responsible.
Responsible. Really, really responsible. Keep in mind, he's not very old. He's like, what, 12? 11. He's 11 years old. So he's, you guys' age-ish. Now imagine you're responsible for taking care of your family. You're it. You're the man of the house. You're responsible for putting food on the table. You're responsible for taking care of your family. You would kind of grow up pretty quick, wouldn't you? Do you remember we talked about how this is a coming of age story? And we're talking about how Jethro is making some mature decisions and learning how to, is growing up in a big way in some way during the story. And we see that a little bit right here as he is already aware that he has to protect himself. So he knows that there's danger, and he's responsible. Like Johnny pointed out, he's a responsible man.
I've learned how to handle a gun properly.
Yeah, but would you say that you are as responsible as Jethro is? No, because you understand that when you handle a gun, you're going out for fun, not for somebody might try to kill me. Right? And also, my family's going to starve if I don't shoot some meat. And there's a difference there, right? And, as Johnny rightfully pointed out, there's a difference there between, knowing how to safely handle a gun, which if you're going to handle a gun, you best go through safety lessons because a gun is like a rattlesnake, right? You need to know how to handle it properly or it can bite you. But the difference between, him knowing how to handle a gun and maybe going hunting with his dad versus Jethro going out with a gun in this time period, because it meant the family would eat or not eat if he shot something or didn't shoot something. Jethro chooses not to call Ed Turner. In the second column on page 44, it talks about how Ed Turner is working in the fields with him. They're paying Ed as hired help to work in the fields with him, and it's just across the way, but Jethro chooses not to call him over. Why do you think he chooses not to call Ed over? What is it about that? What do you think he chooses not to bring Ed into the situation? Ready?
Because he could be a deserter.
Well, at this point, he doesn't really know that there's anything but a wild animal. Grace?
He had a guilty feeling that he was taking a foolish and dangerous chance.
Yeah, he had a feeling that he was taking a dangerous chance, and he didn't want to bring Ed in on that. He didn't want to bring Ed in because he didn't want to put anybody else in danger other than himself. Okay, so we are going to stop there, and we'll pick this back up tomorrow. Remember that we don't have school Thursday and Friday. If you weren't able to get this finished, read a little bit more tonight, because you don't want to be lost as we go through the discussion, okay? So wrap it up and get ready for history.